The day my sister pointed at the door of the house I grew up in and told me I had 24 hours to get out, I did something that confused her deeply. I smiled. Not a cruel smile. Not a performance. Just a quiet, steady, completely genuine smile, the kind that only arrives when you already know something the other person doesn't. When you are holding a card so powerful you don't even need to show it yet. She stood in that hallway, the same hallway where I had taken my first steps, where my mother had hung our school photos in cheap plastic frames that she never replaced because she said she liked the way they looked. And she delivered her verdict like she was reading a business announcement. You've got 24 hours to get out. Momswell says this place is mine now. My father stood behind her. Not speaking. Not intervening. Just nodding slowly, like a man who had spent his entire life choosing the easier daughter and had simply never stopped. I looked at both of them for a long moment. Then I picked up my bag, walked to the door, and said 4 words before I left. Read the whole will. She laughed. She actually laughed at me. And I remember the sound of it, sharp, dismissive, full of a lifetime of believing she had already won everything worth winning, following me out onto the porch as the door clicked shut behind me. But what happened next changed everything. Let me go back. Because you need to understand the full picture before you understand what my mother did. And what she did, I need you to really hear this, was not an accident. It was not luck. It was the most precise, most devastating act of love I have ever witnessed in my entire life. My mother was quiet in the way that truly dangerous people are quiet. Not passive. Not defeated. Watching. Processing. Filing things away behind a calm expression while other people mistook her silence for acceptance. My sister had been making that mistake for 30 years. My father had been making it even longer. Lena, that is my sister, was the favorite from the beginning. Loudly, visibly, without apology. She got the better bedroom. She got a car at 16 wrapped in a bow in the driveway while I took the bus. She got full tuition paid while I worked 2 jobs through college and graduated with honors in a borrowed gown, looking out at empty seats where my family was supposed to be sitting. They missed my graduation. Lena had a volleyball tournament. That was the explanation. That was apparently sufficient. I never said anything. I built my life anyway, my own apartment, my own career, my own version of stability assembled entirely without their help. And I was proud of it. Even when nobody acknowledged it, even when it felt invisible, I was proud. Then my mother got sick. And I saw, with absolute clarity, who everyone actually was. I drove 6 hours the same week we found out. I arranged remote work, packed what I needed, and moved back into my childhood bedroom because that is what you do when someone who gave you life is running out of it. No announcement. No applause. I just came. Lena visited 4 times in 11 months. 4 times. She had reasons every single time. Work. Distance. Exhaustion. Prior commitments. And every single time, my parents, my father, accepted the excuse without one word of pushback. I stopped counting her visits. I was too busy being the one who was actually there. Every doctor's appointment. Every 3 a.m. hospital corridor. Every night when my mother couldn't sleep and just needed a hand to hold in the dark without having to explain why. And in those months, something happened between my mother and me that I will carry for the rest of my life. She started talking to me. Really talking. The kind of honesty that only arrives when someone knows their time is being measured. She told me things about her marriage, her regrets, her grief over who Lena had become and who she herself had allowed Lena to be. She cried once, just once, and she said something I have never forgotten. I gave that girl everything she ever asked for. And she couldn't give me a single month. I didn't say a word. I just held her hand. 3 weeks before she died, she asked me to drive her to her lawyer's office. It was a Tuesday morning, cold, the kind of gray that settles into your bones. I helped her inside and sat in the waiting room for nearly 2 hours while they met behind a closed door. When she came out, she looked exhausted, but completely at peace, the expression of someone who has just finished an important task and set it down for good. She never told me what they discussed. I never asked. When she passed, the grief arrived in layers I was not prepared for. First, the immediate loss, the silence where her voice used to be, the the terrifying smallness of the world without her in it. Then the second wave, watching my father slip entirely into Lena's orbit within days of the burial, as though 11 months of showing up could be erased by a will reading and a blazer. Lena arrived at that will reading like she was attending an awards ceremony she had already won. Nails done. Blazer pressed. Boyfriend no one invited sitting beside her like a prop. She scanned the room with the particular expression of someone who believes they are already the most important person in it. The lawyer began reading. The house was listed first. Beside it, Lena's name. I watched the satisfaction spread across her face like a stain. She glanced at me across the table and I saw it, the fullest, most complete version of every sneer and dismissal she had ever aimed at me, finally given permission to exist in the open. The lawyer kept reading. Lena stopped listening. I did not stop. Because I knew something she didn't. I had been in that waiting room. I had watched my mother walk out of that office with the quiet, settled expression of a woman who had just built something and locked it carefully behind her. My mother never said everything on the first page. 3 days later, Lena showed up at the house with my father behind her and delivered her 24-hour ultimatum like a woman who had already won. She had no idea she had already lost. And the clock she didn't know was running had less than 12 hours left. Her lawyer called her at 9:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was sitting 2 miles away in a coffee shop, watching steam rise from a mug I hadn't touched, completely still, waiting for a world I had already set in motion to arrive at Lena's door. I found out later, from my cousin Sarah, who was there, that Lena had been standing in the kitchen measuring the walls when her phone buzzed. Talking about where she wanted shelving. Comfortable. Already redecorating over my mother's memory like it was wallpaper she'd grown tired of. She answered, smiling. She stopped smiling in under 30 seconds. Here is what my mother had done. And I want you to feel how precise this was, how completely, how lovingly, how lethally precise. The first page of the will listed the house in Lena's name. Straightforward. Exactly what Lena expected. Exactly what she had used to throw me out of the only home I had ever known. Page 2 contained a conditional trust. Drafted 3 weeks before my mother died. Signed. Witnessed. Airtight. Stating clearly that the property could not be sold, altered, refinanced, or transferred without the written consent of both daughters, and that any unilateral action, any attempt to force out the other party, would trigger an immediate and permanent reversion of full ownership. Not split ownership. Not mediated negotiation. Full ownership. To me. Alone. My mother had watched Lena for 30 years. She knew exactly who her eldest daughter would become the moment she believed she had won. She knew Lena would move fast and loud and never read carefully. She had built the entire trap around that knowledge with the patience of a woman who had spent a lifetime being underestimated. The 24-hour ultimatum had not just been wrong. It had been the exact trigger my mother had been waiting for her to pull. The lawyer called me 20 minutes later. Professional, careful, with the particular tone of someone who has just watched an entire family implode through a legal document and is now very deliberately staying neutral. He confirmed the reversion. He confirmed it was permanent. He confirmed that every action Lena had taken since the reading had been documented and was fully admissible. Your mother was exceptionally thorough, he said. Yes, I said. She was. I hung up. Sat quietly for exactly 4 minutes. Then I called a locksmith. I was back at the house by noon. Lena arrived 43 minutes after I'd changed the locks. I heard her car before I saw it, tires too fast, brakes too hard, the particular sound of someone who has just been told the ground beneath them is gone. She got out with her boyfriend and they stood in that driveway staring at the front door like it had grown fangs. My father pulled in behind them a minute later. I opened the upstairs window. You'll need to contact my lawyer, I said, to arrange collection of your things. What came out of Lena's mouth next was not a sentence. It was not even a word. It was something raw and animal, the sound a person makes when the story they have been telling themselves their entire life gets ripped out from under them in a single afternoon. She screamed at the window. She screamed at the door. She grabbed her boyfriend's arm and screamed at him. My father stood 10 feet behind her, completely motionless, the color completely gone from his face. But I was not finished. Not even close. Because my mother had left me one more thing. A second envelope, separate from the will, delivered to me by the lawyer during our call. Inside it, a handwritten letter, and behind the letter, 11 pages of financial documentation that made my hands go absolutely still when I read them. Over 3 years, Lena had borrowed money from my mother. Not once. 11 separate transfers. $63,000. Each transfer accompanied by a signed repayment agreement, signed by Lena, witnessed, dated, stating clearly that every dollar was a loan to be repaid to the estate upon my mother's death. Not 1 cent had ever been returned. My mother had documented every single transaction, every agreement, every broken promise. She had filed them in order, paper-clipped them neatly, and left them for me like ammunition in a war she knew was coming even when she was no longer here to fight it. I sat with those pages for a long time. I thought about working double shifts in college while Lena got her tuition handed to her without conditions. I thought about the empty seats at my graduation. I thought about 6 hours of driving every month while Lena had prior commitments. I thought about my mother at 3 a.m. in a hospital bed, asking quietly if anyone else had called that day, and the way she never let her face show what it cost her when the answer was no. I thought about all of it. Then I called my attorney. The estate claim was filed within 4 days. $63,000 plus 3 years of interest. Fully documented. Completely indefensible. And when Lena's new lawyer, she had already burned through the first one, reviewed the paperwork, he reportedly told her to consider settling immediately because there was no version of this she could win. She did not settle. So we went further. During the discovery process, something else surfaced. Something nobody in our family had known. Lena had used one of my mother's accounts, a joint account from years back that my mother had forgotten to close, to make 2 additional transfers after the diagnosis. Not loans. Not agreements. Just money, taken quietly, while my mother was ill and distracted and trusting. That was no longer a civil matter. That was fraud. The police report was filed on a Thursday morning. I did not file it. The estate attorney flagged it as a legal obligation during discovery, and it moved forward without my involvement. But it moved. And within 48 hours, it was moving through the same family network that had watched Lena be handed everything her entire life. Within a week, the calls started. Aunts, cousins, family friends who had attended my mother's funeral and watched Lena perform grief in the front row. One by one, quietly, without drama or announcement, they began to understand who they had been watching all along. Lena stopped answering her phone. Then she stopped appearing at family events. Then her boyfriend left. I heard this through Sarah, who heard it from someone else, in the way that family gossip moves when the story is too ugly to stay contained. He had apparently not signed up for fraud investigations and property litigation, and the complete unraveling of a person he thought he knew. She lost him. She lost the house. She lost $63,000 she had already spent. She lost the story, the one where she was the chosen one, the favorite, the daughter who had always won. And my father. My father did not just cry. My father sat across from me at the kitchen table of the house that was now completely, legally, permanently mine, and he looked at me the way a man looks when he has finally, too late, understood the full cost of every choice he ever made. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not try to explain. He just sat there, small and old and completely undone, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone he no longer recognized. I did not comfort him. I said one thing. She needed you for 11 months. You gave her 4 visits. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and opened every window in the house. The same kitchen Lena had planned to redecorate. The same walls that held every birthday and every Christmas and every memory my mother had protected her entire life and then, even in death, protected one final time. I repainted it myself. Every wall. Every corner. Took me a full weekend, windows open, sunlight cutting through at the angle that looked exactly like the memory of her. And when it was done, I stood in the middle of that kitchen, paint on my hands, and I thought about my mother, her patience, her precision, the quiet and absolute devastation she had assembled with nothing but love and 2 hours behind a closed door. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten. She didn't warn anyone. She just made sure the truth had somewhere to land. And when it landed, it took everything. Lena didn't just lose a house. She lost her reputation, her relationship, her freedom, her family, and every lie she had ever told herself about who she was and what she deserved. And my mother. My mother didn't just leave me a house. She left me proof that the quiet ones, the ones who show up and say nothing and simply endure, we are the ones who win in the end. They tried to erase me from the only home I ever had. So I let them try. And then I let my mother bury them. They didn't just lose the house. They lost everything they ever were. And this time, there was no page 3.